Hi, my name is Joseph Ganci. You might know me as J. Dan Ganci, my nom de plume. I'm the author of Gideon, The Sound and the Glory. It's an Old Testament epic novel. A lot of interesting insights into Gideon, and Gideon was prehistorical. Gideon is in 3 chapters in Judges. And I go by the King James. I find that to be the most informative primarily because of the poetry and the depth of understanding that evolves that. It's in Elizabethan English, which I believe to be the most precise form of the English language, and it's kind of degraded from that point. And why I say that is because Shakespeare is done in Elizabethan English, and you don't see, like the Bible has 128 versions, the NIV, the American Standard, it goes on and on. You don't see 128 versions of Shakespeare because it would lose the poetry, the depth of understanding, and the metaphor. And that's where I find God's thinking, is in those depths. Every time you read the Bible, you're going to get more out of it. Same with Shakespeare. There's always more. Anyway, so he's in Gideon's in 3 chapters, 6, 7, and 8, exactly 100 verses. And I turned those 100 verses into a 384-page novel. I'm impressed. And I did it in 5 parts. So what I do with these little videos is give you some insights into things I came across. God has been very gracious unto me with understanding and discernment, especially Old Testament stuff. It's not, most Christians kind of dismiss the Old Testament just in passing because the New Testament speaks of Jesus Christ, and he's the truth, the way, and the life. And so that's where their focus is. But there's so much in the Old Testament that proclaims the coming of Jesus, which kind of confirms, like it's in the mouth of the second witness, the matter shall be established. So the witness is the Old Testament, and the second witness is the New Testament. I like to think of it as like the Urim and Thummim, which means lights and perfection. And so the Old Testament is sort of the lights, and then the New Testament is the perfection. So this segment, I'm going to talk about the elevation of Eli. While I was writing the novel, I got to Judges 9. So Judges 4 and 5 got in there with the death of the sons of Gideon's mother, his brothers. And then part 2 is Gideon and his story of this 300 starving men that conquer an empire, which is a very rousing, moving story. Part 3 is Abimelech. Abimelech is his half Israel and half Canaanite love child that becomes the first king of Israel and of Canaan, and he kills his 70 brothers, I believe that were a Congress of Judges, to become the first king. One of his brothers escapes, and Jotham. And it was curious because Abimelech couldn't find him, tried as hard as he could. He killed everybody but Jotham. Couldn't find the kid. And I believe the reason why is because he was the youngest son. And of course, as the youngest son, he was always being preyed upon by his older brothers for chores. So he knew how to hide. And he hid away, couldn't be found, and they finally gave up. Abimelech ends up in a place called Shechem, actually, in Hebrew. And so I'm going, well, why is Jotham down in Shechem? If I had an army, a small army looking after me, and that just killed my 70 brothers, they're going south, I'm going north. But he ends up down there too. And I'll go, what is he doing down there? There'd be only really one reason he would be down there. He's following his brother to kill him. He wants to kill him for what he did. But he couldn't get to him. As much as he tried, couldn't get to him. He was always surrounded, and it would have been a suicide mission. So finally, he goes up on a mountain that overlooks Shechem, Mount Gerizim. And up on the mountain, there's a house of God. What I needed was I needed a bridge between Judges 9, which is Abimelech, and 1 Samuel. There's so much in between. Ruth's in there, and Samson's in there, and there's another book or so in there. And how do I make that transition of that piece of time? So I was going to make some story up, just fairly creative, but I had nothing there. I prayed to the Lord that morning, and I said, Lord, can you give me a bridge? I asked for a bridge. And so that I needed something to cross over to 1 Samuel. And as soon as I got on the computer that morning, the first thing that popped up was Eli, which means elevation, the elevation of Eli. And Eli was at the right place at the right time with the right job and the right posterity. There he was, the bridge. And Eli is on Mount Gerizim, which overlooks Shechem. And Jotham goes up, he's on that mountain, goes up in the mountain, and he gives the curse of trees against Abimelech and Shechem for joining in with him in the killing of his brothers. Well, once he knew that, he had to get out of there because he knew Abimelech would have came and killed him for sure, because he had to go, and he gets down the mountain and goes to Beer, which is, of course, on the eastern side, where he was probably safe out of his brother's hand. But while he's up there, so was Eli. Eli's up there. Now, Eli's elevated on a mountain, and he's between 10 and 12 miles away to the horizon is Shiloh, which means peace, right? But that's where the Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle of the congregation is set. Sort of like the hub of religious veneration is 10 miles away from where this guy is. So he's even though he's elevated on a mountain, he wants to be elevated in the priesthood. He wants to be the high priest. But he can't quit his job. He can get fired, but he can't quit. That was the power of the rule. And the head priest is called Uzi, like the machine gun pistol, the Israeli gun. And the high priest Uzi is having a problem with Eli. He keeps forgetting to put the salt in the sacrifice. And I'm going, well, wait a minute. Why is salt so important? Jesus talks about salt. If it loses its savor, it has no value, it would be just to be trodden under the feet of men. The word salt is also value, and that the word salary comes from salt. He's not worth his salt. So I'm going, why would they have to put salt in the sacrifice? And he keeps forgetting to do that. Either intentionally, I believe intentionally, so he can get fired. Or eventually, Uzi's had enough. He says, you keep forgetting to put in the salt. I've had enough of that. And off he goes. Oh, by the way, his job was curator of temple treasures. That was odd, right? The last time Gideon's ephod of gold is seen is down in Shechem in the tower. So Eli would have been aware, as a curator of temple treasures, of Gideon's ephod of gold. And it was the last place it was seen. It was burnt up. Well, it was burnt anyway in the tower in Shechem when Abimelech burns it down with all the people in there. That's an interesting little piece. But that's where the Bible says the last time the ephod of gold is seen there. So he would have been aware of all this. So Eli turns around, and so he gets fired. And I'm going, what's with the salt? What's with the salt? And so I'm going, well, the thought came to me, what was used for a preservative of food before refrigeration? Well, naturally, salt. Salted fish, salted pork. They didn't eat pork, but salted meat. It'll preserve it. And so it turns corruption into incorruption. And what I realized is salt is an element of the resurrection, the incorruption, from corruption to incorruption. So my last editor was a 16th generation rabbi, not a rabbi. He doesn't like when I say that, Jerry. And I asked him about the salt. He says, oh yeah, we use salt. He's Orthodox Jew. He says, we use salt to pull the blood out of meat. We can't eat blood. So we pull it off and makes it kosher. It's one of the ways to make meat kosher is to draw out the blood. So it all kind of fit. There's also salt in the censer in the tabernacle. When they do the incense burner, there's like 7 elements. They said, some people say up to 30, but there's 7 that I found, and some people say there was more, that had to be a particular formula to burn on the altar of God, and one of the elements was salt. So salt came in pretty well in there. So now, a little fast forward, Jesus, when he's up on the cross, can't be up there during the coming of Passover at sundown. They have to be pulled down, the 3 of them. They can't have the bodies dying on the beginning of Passover. Against all Jewish law and tradition. So Caiaphas, the head priest, goes to Pontius Pilate and tells him they got to come down. They can't be up there. And Pilate's going along with the show to try to stop any type of rioting or insurrection. He's there to keep a lid on this, on Jerusalem. And so he sends out a soldier to break the legs of the people on the cross, the 2 malefactors and Jesus. Well, they knock off the first 2, break the leg, and that's a lot of work. As a soldier, believe me, a soldier would not want to do that if he had a choice. He'd have to get up on a ladder with a big hammer and smash the leg. And this way, without support of the body hanging from a cross, you would the diaphragm wouldn't work. You would deflate the diaphragm, and then you would die of expiration. You couldn't get air. The lungs need the diaphragm to work, and so that would kill them. Right away. They didn't get the lingering death. They had to be pulled down. So by the time they got to Jesus, after all the scourging, after the brutality that he went through, he's already dead. He died. And so the soldier really doesn't want to climb up if he doesn't have to. And he said, hey, look, the guy's dead. No sense breaking his legs, which goes along with the Paschal lamb. It'll have no bone broken or splintered. And so he said, well, are you a doctor? How do you know that he's dead? And he grabs a spear, and his fellow's name was Longinus, and he pokes Jesus in the side, and blood and water came out, the last of Jesus's blood. And so Jesus is resurrected, but this told me there is no blood, right? That the resurrected being is a flesh and bone, but not of blood. And of course, it makes sense because as a resurrected being, air is corrosive. So if you're an eternal, immortal being, you wouldn't want to be in a corrosive environment. So without blood, you don't need air, and without air, there's no corrosion. So it kind of fit with Eli. I diverge. So Eli goes down, he gets fired, he goes down to Sation, to Shiloh. And there's the tabernacle, and it's all very exciting. And he comes in and he meets he meets a woman down there, of course, a beautiful woman. And he's a single guy that's been up on the mountain. Nature takes its course, and he ends up marrying this woman who turns out to be the daughter of Phineas, who is the high priest at Shiloh. And Phineas in Hebrew means the bronze-colored one, or the colored one. And he marries his daughter. Now, that's not biblical. There's no proof of this happening. But what led me to that is because Phinehas has a son, Abishua, who by all rights would have been the next high priest. The son gets the priesthood going up. But it becomes Eli, and Eli's sort of like a Johnny-come-lately. And how come Eli gets the priesthood? Well, because he's the son-in-law. And how I think that was the case is because he names his oldest son Phinehas after grandpa. And then his other son, the twins, Hophni, they call the mastermind, troublemaker. And then Phinehas Jr. would go along with that. If you look, I want to show you, if you look at Eli's posterity, this is the front cover of the book. You can see it. It's Gideon coming out of the fog of the ages and out of the night. He's a night battler. You see there's a little lamp at the corner, a little pot pitcher, and that's why it was a lamp. Only the King James has lamps, and you could put a lamp in a pitcher, but you can't put a torch in a pitcher. And they will say torches. Oh, here's the family tree or the genealogy tree of Eli. Start with Jacob. The priesthood, the Levitical priesthood, Levies. All right, and you see it right at the top. It goes Phinehas and his brother Hophni are asked to guard after Eli becomes the high priest years later. God's kind of upset at Eli because he's not, the two bad priests are seducing the women coming into the tabernacle. They won't eat the boiled meat. They're rowdy. They're troublemakers. And Eli doesn't address it properly. And God gets upset with them as far as the coming of the genealogy of the priesthood. And Phinehas Jr. has a son, two sons, Ahitub and Ichabod, which means the glory is gone. And that's because on that day, Ichabod is born. Phinehas's wife dies. Eli dies. And his two sons, Phinehas and Hophni, die, protecting the Ark of the Covenant, which was brought into a battle with the Philistines. Now, the Philistines had captured the Ark. They call it the God box. And I thought that was appropriate because everybody tries to put God in a box. You can't do it. God is God, and he manifests himself however he would be in the understanding of the person looking. So he's not limited to his ability to communicate. And they take the ark, and on that day, all this happens on that day. And of course, when Eli is told that his sons are dead, but the thing that got him the most was that the ark had been taken by the Philistines. And he was sitting in a chair and he was overweight, and he's 98 years old. He falls back, breaks his neck. So he's dead. You had all this happen in the one day. And the Philistines bring the ark to their Philistia, to the house of Dagon. And that morning, after it's in there for the night, Dagon's down on his face. The Philistines, well, maybe it was a little rumble or something, an earthquake. They put him back up. Next day they come in, his head's chopped off, and his hands are chopped off, and his feet are chopped off. They go, there might be something going on with this ark here. So they start moving it around. They send it to there's 5 princes of the Philistines, and they send it to Gath and the other cities, and wherever it goes, people are getting emerods. Well, it's been understood that emerods mean hemorrhoids. So they decide, standing up, they all got hemorrhoids, and they decide, hey, this might be really God. Their God might be God. So a very powerful God. Maybe we could placate him. We'll put him in a cart. We'll put the ark in a cart, And we'll, as a favor to God, to show our sorrow for capturing the box, we'll put 5 golden mice and 5 golden emeralds or hemorrhoids. If you don't believe that's the case, you can Google it and they'll show you what a golden hemorrhoid looks like. But no one's ever really discerned why the mice. Well, the mice are in the cart because the mice came in like a field of locusts, like they were field mice, and they ate all the grain. And what they didn't eat, they defecated on, right? So even if you washed it off, it was poisonous. And so I'm thinking about this. What do you lose if you have no grain in your diet? No fiber. Well, constipation. And if the constipation lasts long enough, what happens? Hemorrhoids. So God didn't give them hemorrhoids. He gave them mice. And why mice? Because God uses the weak things of this world to confound the mighty, just like he uses the foolish to confound the wise. And as this is happening, so they put the 5 mice in there. He gave them mice because the mice are the weak things of this world. And the cart goes off, and finally, with 2 kine, cows that never known a yoke or plow, they took their calves away. They're flush with milk and very uncomfortable, and they head out into a road. And then if they go to the right, they're going to Israel. They go to the left, they're going to Philistia. There's no pilot on the cart other than God. That's their deal. And it goes to Israel, it goes to the town of Beth Shemesh. And of course, they want to see what God looks like. So they break down the cart. They sacrifice the 2 kine. But you know what? Now that he's here, let's take a peek. Let's take a peek inside. Let's take a look to see what God looks like. And they open the lid, and I think the Bible says it caused 53,000 or 55,000 people to die. So evidently they never got to see Raiders of the Lost Ark. You don't open the lid of the ark if you're not a Levite or invited by God. So the story continues on, but at this point, I think that's sufficient to consider and fun to contemplate. So thank you for your time. Thank you for allowing me to be a guest in your home. Thank you. God bless and shalom.